Jean, am I unmuted? I think I'm unmuted.
Am
I muted?
You're muted. Yeah, should I?
Okay, there you go. Is it working now? All right. Okay, I'll go back to my presentation. Thank you. Navigating a few screens is always very interesting. Yeah, so as Jenny said, I've had a few of us have had an interest in conversation analysis, and yeah, I had a few instances of doing some research with it, and I was wanting to do some reading up on conversation analysis, and I came across this article titled "Conversation Analysis as a Creative Research Method," and I thought, how does conversation analysis fall under a creative research method? And I thought that was quite an interesting way of framing it. And I wanted to read a little bit more about, why have people decided this could be as a creative methodology? Because from my exposure to CA, like I found it sometimes a bit intimidating, and very much around like sequence organization, turn taking. And I thought, how does this become creative? And so this really piqued my interest, because I especially like things that maybe frame the way that I see a methodology, and kind of make me think about it in a little bit of a more broad manner. So
we did have a bit of a giggle as well about some of our CA colleagues who are very purist and would they consider this creative?
Not creative.
I would love their opinion, actually.
Yeah.
Actually.
It would be useful to get insights because I think certainly seeing it framed as creative is something I haven't come across before. So yeah, and I'm sure we'll chat further about why they've decided it's creative and what elements make it creative. Yeah.
Definitely. So where this study and where this article is based off of, it's based in early childhood research, which I mean is not an area of research interest at all for me. So I read it through the lens of how can I understand, again, conversation analysis as a creative methodology for the research that I'm interested in. So how I framed the talk today is I'm giving this little bit of introduction about where they've come from, and I'll do a little bit of their data just because it is interesting and to see how they've used it as a creative methodology. But I've also tried to make it a bit more general because I know that a lot of us, we're all in very different research, and often we're in healthcare research. We're not really in early childhood research. And what was interesting, so the author of the study, of this paper, she was saying that she really wanted a creative methodology that would authentically and reliably capture how young children engage in the world, and that highlight that young children actually are contributors and do actually bring something to a conversation, to a learning environment. And how could she explore that in a deeper way without it being contrived or a set up example? And I liked where she said that they also right-bearing participants in everyday interactions. I thought that was such a nice way of framing it because, like even what just before Rona was telling us about her 4-year-old niece, who's quite vivacious, and and even if you think of that, like they come with their own little personalities, their own what they're going to contribute. So how do we actually then observe that in research? And so Bateman, she said she really felt that multimodal CA could be framed as a creative methodology because, and so multimodal CA is when we analyze not only the words that people say, but also the gestures they're using, facial expressions, any other nonverbal cues as well. And that multimodal CA then is how you transcribe your videos. And we'll go into that a little bit just now, but she just really felt that it had the potential to demonstrate how your participants actively co-constructs in interactions. And like that's something I'm also really interested in because it's the how people are doing things. I don't always just want to know the outcome of what they're doing, but I want to know the process of what they're doing. And I liked it also where she said about actively co-constructing, and that co-construction and the interactions. Like, I love all those words because of the power that those words hold. And that, that this could then be authentic for how she explored. And I really think even for us, oftentimes when we're looking at our research, I know that I've been in a few webinars and workshops where there's kind of a move in some of the research in the UK where they want more co-constructed. And how are you co-constructing your research with the participants? And what are you doing in that space? And that's one of the things that I also like about CA, and I'll get to it, not that only you can co-construct your research by using CA, but also you get to see co-constructions in a more minute level as well. But you can do it at a minute level and at a broad level.
Yeah, I think that's when I started digging into why they might be labeling it as creative, that seems to be the main issue, is that it's creative methods typically involve participants while studying one's own practice. And that seems to be what makes it creative.
Yeah. Which I didn't think that was the definition of creative. So it's quite an interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That other the community of practice talk that we went to, where creative methods were pitched more like out of the box, out of the ordinary, not traditional. And I think that's maybe the juxtaposition that we're finding a bit humorous here. Strange to get our heads around is that CA is such an established traditional method, but I guess because it's not used that frequently in a lot of everyday kind of contexts, or in understanding practices to the extent that it should be used, perhaps then people see it as something novel and ordinary and creative. Yeah, because it feels radical.
Yeah. And perhaps in this context, the correct word is flexible, because I found that the conversation analysis was particularly helpful for me to see what was happening in a therapy interaction, and especially with children, because I think we make the mistake of trying to test them in formal testing, and a lot of them are not desktop ready. And also the tests are not suitable for a particular set of experiences. And, if you like the idea of child-led therapy, this is a very good way to maybe quantify it a little bit more authentically, because it allows that flexibility. But I think particularly for me during COVID was looking at my interactions in terms of what I was doing and what the response was. And I think that that's often what we miss, is what are we as a conversational partner doing to elicit conversation, and what is the result? And is that creative? Is that flexible? I suppose that's just terminology, but I think it's definitely an approach that we need to take with young children.
So that question or that issue of the how, I think, is a really important one. And certainly if I think of the big systematic review that Kim and Rona and I have just worked on with simulation, there was nothing there in terms of looking at the how. It's a lot of quantitative or qualitative outcomes, experiences, but not really looking at how the learning happens, how it's co-constructed in the moment. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And certainly the preliminary work that we've been doing on some of those sub-studies has been hugely enlightening, using this strategy, which we would never have got to if we just looked at student experiences and perceptions or some sort of outcome survey.
Yeah, you don't get the depth.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's also why then, like, and you can't do, like, for example, for this lady, she couldn't do outcome surveys with her kiddies in the preschool. But and that's why I think it is so nice how it can be used across a variety of participants, and it also doesn't just favor one group of participants over the other. It allows that equal, or as long as, I think maybe when you're analyzing it, if you allow that equal voice. So I think it's also maybe creative from the perspective of the shift in power dynamics. because that also stands out for me, because like we often want to, like in our space, I always feel like we're wanting to maybe highlight the voice of students or highlight the voice of the clinical educators, or, you know, we always seem to highlight a voice, whereas what I like about CA is it's bringing both voices together and how they work together.
And it's also making what you think intuitively, it's almost a proof. You know, like if you ask a question in this way, you're likely to get this response. And I think for somebody who is inexperienced, that's extremely helpful. You know, that it is quantifiable,
Yes,
in that sense. And it takes, I think, a lot of the fluffiness out of being a good therapist or listening actively, or, you know, these words that we throw out at people without actually having evidence to support what we say. And I think the CA does that.
definitely. Okay, so this just was a summary, especially for those who are not familiar with CA. Just the fact that it's based on ethno methodology, and it's based from Sachs, Schlegoff, and Jefferson. And just as we've been talking, it's a detailed investigation. It mainly looks at the systematic turn taking that happens in everyday conversations, and it reveals social order that is produced by participants from within, which I think we've covered quite nicely actually in just our discussions.
But I think what's so key and what really came out in that workshop that you and I attended, the membership categorization analysis workshop, which is a similar sort of a method, is that things like culture are not just there, they're actually co-constructed and negotiated all the time. Things like reflexivity, positionality that we've been talking about a lot in our training are co-constructed, renegotiated all the time. And so a lot of these concepts that we take for granted are absolutely pivotal to understand from an interactional point of view. You can't understand them any other way, because they're not just there to be studied, they actually need to be looked at within an interactional space. Yeah.
Thank you. And that's why I think, yeah, that links nicely to that revealing social order, because it's your culture, your power dynamics, everything else that comes in there. So thank you, Jenny. And yeah, at least, and also with everyday conversation, it's what then isn't stilted or isn't a set up kind of, what's the word that I'm wanting? It isn't just like a constructed, this, you must come and talk to me about this, and we gonna video you. And like, what I like about CA is it's more organic. Thank you, that's the word. Organic. Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah. I really like as well at the book by Ricadema, which looks at the video reflexive ethnography and the rationale behind why one would want to look at practice with practitioners. I think that's really important as well. So
yeah, which we get.
So identifying and understanding mundane practices and kind of bringing them to the fore. So things that you don't even think about when you're interacting or teaching or practicing or whatever you're doing. And then identifying opportunities for change within those. And I always say to people, this stuff is not rocket science. Once you look at the communication and the strategies, or what is being done, what isn't being done, what works, what doesn't. But it's really about bringing it to the fore and to people's attention.
Yep.
And that's really where the power lies, is going in with this microscope and seeing things that you wouldn't see if you just did surveys or questionnaires or interviews.
Definitely. And I mean, and that's what I've found challenging actually with like shifting into CA, because I did CA many years ago. And then I thought, oh, but this actually sounds like a really nice methodology for us to figure out how learning is occurring in simulations. And so that's where my journey only in December kind of started with CA again. And like the trainings I've been on, the things I've read, like sometimes I battle with the fact that it's so mundane that I'm like, oh, like, but not oh in a bad way, but like, oh, like that's actually what I'm meant to be looking for. And then the power of that, when you tweak it or change it or give a learning input into that so that students can learn to change. And it's been quite powerful that the mundane is okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the lovely example that we've just come across with our own work is looking at the SIM data that Kim had collected and seeing how students are tackling doing an orientation assessment with a brain injured patient. So do you know who you are, where you are, what's happened to you, which is very mundane. It's very basic kind of routine part of the work that we do as speech therapists. But I don't think we've ever looked at how does that work and how do we teach students to do that? And how do we tweak the way in which questions are asked? So we don't get a patient staring at us like, why are you asking me that? That makes no sense.
And how do you respond?
Exactly. How do you respond when the patient gives you a response that you didn't expect? We've never looked at that. I don't think anybody's looked at that. It's this taken for granted. This is just something we do.
And you should just know how to do it.
Yes, you it's just intuitive. Yes. Yeah.
But it's not.
No, it's not.
But you know, also, and this I don't think has ever been researched, is that research that says like what's the best way to get somebody to do something, like how do you talk somebody down off a roof, literally, and the phrase was, would you be willing? And that was the most effective thing. But my problem with that is the minute it becomes mainstream, it loses its power. And that's why learning certain phrases are very time bound, because my worst is I'm passionate about. Now, the minute you say that, is like I'm thinking, ugh. But at the time, it was extremely effective. And everybody's CV had that on it. But the minute it gets overused, the meaning changes. And that's the problem with vocabulary is it gets overused, misused, manipulative, and then it gets changed. So I'm wondering if it happens at the same effect with children who haven't got that sophistication and cynicism that perhaps an adult has. Because I think that's the problem with CA is that it is contextually and time-bound, and that certain phrases are never going to be universal forever.
Yeah, so I guess one has to keep studying these topics and keep on studying interaction.
And that
moves
authenticness.
forward. Yes.
So you've got a genuine, and I think CA doesn't always capture the genuine emotional behind a conversation, because something can look fine on paper, but if the person hasn't got the right attitude, which I think is very difficult to test, it doesn't come across as well.
And that's something the conversation we've had around this concept of atmosphere and capturing that in an interaction, and because it's there, the vibes or whatever you want
It makes a good interaction with a healthcare provider.
Yeah, but how do you actually capture that? And that's a whole conversation for another day. I think it's something to kind of think about, that there are limits to this methodology. And I think Nancy will show us some of the complexities of actually trying to capture things like non-verbals. How do you actually do some of these things and put it on paper, and that action of trying to take conversation and put it on paper is not always easy, but it can
and
be.
You bring your own biases.
But it can be very powerful. So, but one has to bear in mind these caveats, I guess.
Yes.
So it's important to bring them up.
Yeah, and what are the limitations? And if you need to make extra notes about what actually went on, that you can't transcribe necessarily.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, so this was just again to kind of, with it being the multimodal CA, they were speaking about how it was conversation analysis, but could be a creative method because it's the transcription of video recordings. And again, I found this quite interesting because I was like, but we often do that. That's often within our frame of reference of the kind of research we're doing. So I was also quite surprised that this was so creative for a different space of research. And I don't mean that in a critical way. I was like, but like, surely this, I mean, like you've been doing research like this for years. I thought this was kind of part and parcel, mainstream. But it's so interesting to see that it's not, and that's what then also made it creative, is the fact that they were using video recordings. And they were just, and she was just talking about that when you analyze video recordings, when you transcribe video recordings, you can represent talk and gesture in as much detail as possible. And there are the symbols, like there's the Jeffersonian symbols that we do use. And she was just saying what was really nice is if you do that rigorous transcription, it allows moments of interaction, social organization practices, rules, and values that are important to the participants. And at that place and time are made visible.
Getting to that point
Yeah.
of understanding what's important to the participants versus what's important
To
to you,
you,
the
the
researcher. That is tricky, I think.
Yes. And that's where they also did bring it up, I think, as a bit of a creative methodology as well, about trying to separate from your interpretation versus just seeing what is there,
And
which
we've
is
fallen-
difficult.
We've fallen into that trap before doing papers that involve interactional analysis or CA, where sometimes we jump, 2 + 2 = 68, and you jump ahead and you start making assumptions about motivations and why is the patient behaving like this? Why is this person doing this in a phone call? And so that's always, I feel like one has to really hold oneself back and stop doing that. You've just got to look at what the data is showing you.
But that's one thing I really found also, again, like a bit of a struggle coming from like a thematic analysis background when I did the MCA training and when I've done a bit of reading up on the CA and discussions with you, Jenny, like it is so hard not to put your own interpretations in and to take that step back and to actually say what's important to the participants at this place, at this time, without my own agenda,
Classic
which is
example of that,
hard.
working with a child is this child had wrong pronoun use. So he said, me want that one. So like a therapist, I said, I want that one. He looked at me and goes, no, we want it. And I mean, that's exactly what's important to who, and how do you then marry your therapy girl?
Why are you taking the toy?
And you realize you have an absurd.
I see Megan's got her hand up.
Oh, thanks.
Megan?
Hi everyone. Yeah, I think there's a nice reference. I can't find it. I'll put it on the chat. But Nancy, there's the somewhere one of the CA literature talks about the importance of unmotivated looking when analyzing CA data. But naturally, as researchers, and the reason why we put together a project is that we all have got some sort of aim or some sort of interest as to why we video recorded or looked at a particular topic in the first place. So it's about there's a nice reference that basically says that it's the importance of unmotivated looking, but acknowledges that as researchers we will naturally have our own biases or something that we sort of are looking for in the data, but really that we need to be open to new ideas and to new perspectives when looking at things from a CA perspective.
Thank you, Megan.
Yeah, no, I think it's so critical to really put aside those biases and personal opinions coming into this kind of research. And if you are going to use additional points of data, talk extrinsic data, we call it, so something like an interview to supplement what you're seeing in the interaction. Also understanding that sometimes those don't necessarily align. So what somebody remembers or thinks about an interaction might be very different to what you're actually seeing happening in the interaction. And we see this often with doctor-patient interactions or health professional-patient encounters, where the patient will tell us in an interview, yes, it was fine, I understood everything, it was a lovely talk with the doctor. And then you look at the interaction and you see, no, there are moments of misunderstanding or moments where things didn't actually go as efficiently as the patient is remembering or telling you.
Definitely. Okay, so that was the thing a bit about one aspect of why it's creative, is because you're transcribing video recordings. And sorry, I put this whole quote, and I think there's a lot to unpack here, but I really, really like this. It said CA allows us to see the mechanisms of interaction, as we've spoken about, and to see the interactional details of pedagogy. And I mean, that was nice because because it's in learning, and I'm just very interested in teaching and learning. So I like that it also highlights that interactional details of pedagogy. And it said these details are particularly useful when applying recommended systematic approaches to teaching and learning, such as notice, recognize, respond. Paying close attention to how we notice, recognize, and respond allows us to unpack teaching practices and offers insights into the practical achievement of concepts such as scaffolding, guided participating, and sustained and shared thinking. So this was also then where they were bridging from the transcribing. This was like what they were saying then is why it is also creative, is because it allows you to see these things, but then also the implications of seeing them. And like Jenny was saying, being able to do something with it and implement it, which led to the next point. Okay, I just want to check. We've spoken about all of that in quite a bit. But what I wanted to say was, it leads to the next point of that, what they also did and where they looked at it as a creative method was that they didn't just decide on the which parts to analyze of the videotapes on their own as researchers. They also went back to ask the teachers, what did you think were important moments in this session you had with the kids? And they also try to marry that co-construction from that point of view, as well as getting teacher involvement of saying, your voice is also valuable as to what you thought went well, but now let's actually analyze that and then see. And what was really nice is because then the teachers identified those kind of what they thought were pertinent moments. Those were then also the moments when they then took the CA further, based loosely on the CALM, which is where you use CA to you re-look at it at the interactions, and then you see how you could improve and what things you could then implement and do. That's what they also then did with the teachers. They then took those scenarios that the teachers had actually chosen and did a session where the teachers could rewatch and actually see what was happening with the interactions to then guide their future practice. So I think it's really nice how, and I think this is where they were also saying CA was creative, is the fact that it does take from the video to getting the teachers a voice on what they also thought was important, but then still looking at the interactional data, but then again bringing teachers back in to actually watch, look at the transcriptions, look at the videos, and see actually what was happening, so that the learning that occurred was also driven from the teachers, not just the researchers saying, oh, I saw you did these kind of questions, you should phrase it rather like this, and I'm sure you'd get a better interaction. So it was really nice how that kind of flow worked. And I think that's where they were also, because of these various points in it, we're saying it can be creative.
I think what's interesting for me is to try and think about, so with the moments that the teachers identified as important, would those match what a researcher would identify as important, or what would actually end up being important after the analytical process? And I'm thinking of the simulations that we did with the speech students, and what would we have said was important after that versus what we now know, having looked at the data. So I think that is an interesting conundrum to think about. So I was really interested to see how they had included teachers in that way in the study. And I think certainly if one looks at the video reflexive ethnography approach that Nicodema and colleagues talk about, it's very much something that you watch videos with the teachers or the participants or the practitioners, and do a lot of reflective work with them around that. But yeah, as I say, sometimes the things that you think are important are not actually the earth-shattering parts that come out of the analysis.
And it would be interesting to see maybe if you did do like the teachers give input, but then you as the researcher still, transcribing everything and what stands out for you compared to what the teachers find. I also just thought it was a really lovely way of offering autonomy and offering maybe better buy-in as well into research. If your participants know they get to be part of this process, and allows that more authentic participation. And it did interest me because I'd love to see how we could include research participants in that decision making, but then also looking at it of what did we notice as well. I think you've got to do the balance. Yeah, I definitely think you need the balance.
Absolutely.
And it can't be a one or the other.
No, I think that's the point as well, is that you bring practitioners or participants into the research, and then together you kind of co-constructing the analytic focus. Yeah. So, I mean, I think what's interesting is that what these bits that Megan has posted in the chat here about, it's a reference from Sathis, that unmotivated exploring is of course a contradiction or paradox, because looking is motivated. So there would be no looking being done in the first place.
I love that.
We have this approach in CA to say, you know, oh, we must go in without any sort of preconceived ideas of what we're looking for. But the very fact that you've gone and recorded an interaction and you've set up this whole study means that you want to look at something in the first place, and you have some sort of idea of what you're looking at. So there is that contradiction. But again, yeah, I guess one has to set aside and maybe not focus too heavily, especially when we're practitioners looking at our own research. So the SIM example is a good one of saying, well, what might we have thought was important to focus on versus what we've actually found. And it's been a much more useful exercise in that instance to go in and just look at the data without the preconceived discussion of or notions of what we thought might be important to look at.
Yep. And I suppose we always have this broad view, like for me, it was with the simulation study. It was really like, I just want to know how students learn in the sim. I know there's all this like emphasis on the pre-brief and the debrief, but surely there's learning happening within the sim, and how's that happening? So you have a notion of what you want to look for, but then it was very interesting, like what we've discussed or analyzed. Like I never expected those things to pop out.
Yeah,
so I think
something we thought about before.
No,
oh, that's important to look at.
No. So it is quite interesting how you can have a motivation of a very broad, but not going and saying, okay, we want to look at how students introduce themselves to the patient, or we want to see how students ask questions during orientation. And maybe that's where you get the kind of the balance.
Maybe also going in with a much broader conceptualization, as you say, Nancy, of let's look at how students learn, or let's look at how students learn to communicate with a patient. And then the analysis allows us to go into the specifics and to zoom in on phenomena of interest there.
Yeah, because also if we didn't start with that main question, we would never have looked at the data.
Yes, you wouldn't have a project.
Yes, we wouldn't have a project, and I wouldn't have looked at the data, because you've got to start with a question. You've got to be inquisitive. So you can't be completely unmotivated.
Absolutely, yeah, but I do think also when you're working with practitioners where, you know, where you're studying their practice as a researcher, but they're involved in the study, it is a bit different, and then you can have discussions around, well, what do you think is important, or what do you want to get out of this study? And then knowing, obviously, that the process of analysis is going to take everybody down a much deeper road than what they initially thought. Yeah.
Yep, and I think that's really what I really liked. Is I honestly, before reading this paper, I'd never thought about asking the participants like for their input on aspects of whatever we've recorded. Like I'd never thought of that.
So it would be interesting maybe going forward to say with these simulations, to ask students, or what did they think was an important moment? Just as an exercise, whether we do anything with that or not. But I think it would be very interesting to see what they felt was key versus what we actually see as what emergence during the analytic process.
Yes, as key.
Because that's reflective.
Definitely.
Sure.
All right. So this is in also what I've spoke about when I was saying like this whole process that they've had. This was also why they said that it could be a creative method, is because then the data could be shared at subsequent workshops where they can reflect in a safe environment about their own practices. And I really like this quote as well, where they said it's not so much about the data you collect, but the creative ways in which you use it that affords knowledge generation, not extraction. And I thought that was quite nice because, again, it shifts that dynamic of we researching to like pull out the knowledge, where actually when we co-construct like this, it's about the knowledge generation. And then that's also creative.
So I guess it comes back to your earlier point, Nancy, about there's co-construction happening in the interaction itself, and then there's co-construction happening in the analytic research process, which is quite beautiful, actually, in a way that happens organically. Yeah,
definitely. And then I suppose, like I was saying just now, I'd never thought about that, or even this stage. I mean, I've read like bits of the I blanked the video reflexivity, that book. Yes, reflexive ethnography. I've read bits of that book. And so it was really nice because it opened my eyes to like, oh, how they sit and, go through a video together. But like, again, I'd never thought of it about this way. And so it's kind of flipping how I view research and how we can make it such a better co-constructed experience for our participants. And not just because sometimes I felt like, for me personally, I've come into research being like, I need information from you. Like, just give me the information that I need and I'll do it. And then like, I just want it and I need it and I'm doing this. Whereas I really just like how this flips and flipped my thought processes around research. And
I think it's so exciting when you can come up with recommendations.
Yes.
And ways of supporting practice learning that come directly out of the data. And then you can feed them back immediately. So immediately, you and I have already started feeding back very preliminary results from looking at that data, fed that back into our teaching semester. So it's a very quick process potentially.
Definitely.
Of getting it actually into practice.
Once you've had someone transcribe it really well.
CA is a long, intense process, but because Nancy had sat and done hours and hours of transcription of these very short videos that we have, it meant that we were able to sit and talk about it, see things, already have preliminary data sessions, get some kind of direction out of that, and then immediately feed it back into the teaching. So I mean, it's not actually that quick, but what I mean is that
no shame. Yes,
to get some kind of input and effect change can take many years, but here you can actually do this relatively quickly.
But compared to like if you look at implementation science and how long, like with those studies of how long when something's found in research for it to actually go into practice, I mean, isn't it like 10 to 15 years?
That's exactly.
Whereas like this
is
we recorded the videos a year ago.
Exactly, and it's a year that we've been able to implement.
Yep. So that's not bad compared to 10 to 15 years.
Significant.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let me just see. Okay, so here I wanted to give you, I pressed too many times, sorry. Okay, and then they seem to say that the symbols were creative in transcription. I wasn't sure on that. I was like, I don't know if this is creative, how I have to like mark every time they raise their pitch, go down in pitch, speed up, slow down, go louder, go softer. I was like, this is not creative. You obviously haven't done this.
So for me, the verbal transcription is not particularly creative, but the non-verbal, I think, multimodal is where things do get very creative.
Yeah.
So, but the just getting the text down or the talk down and putting in a few markers it's hard.
Tricky. Yep. It's tricky. But I liked here because here they did bring up the unmotivated looking when they said in transcribing it is that iterative process but it needs to begin with your unmotivated
Mm.
looking. So like as you do it and as you watch again and again and write and refine, then it becomes visible.
And it's so exciting. So Nancy and I sat at a writing retreat, when was it? In July. And we looked at
Yes.
some of your transcripts.
Yes.
And we suddenly had these aha moments like, look at this. This is so interesting. What are the students doing here? What's not happening that we expect should happen? So very exciting when you start to see these things emerging.
Yep.
And we've had subsequent data sessions and meetings. And yeah, we can get very fired up. It's really exciting to see.
Yeah, definitely. And this, I like their last point as well. And it's a key thing to remember. And I think it is, like we always say, we've got to be thinking and we've got to be reflexive and thinking of our own positionality. But the important thing is when you're transcribing is that you only transcribe what is seen and you try to avoid any of assumptions of why. Which can be quite challenging, but I think it's key to keep it at least in the fore of your mind. Unmotivated looking and only transcribe what is seen. So I just wanted to show a little bit. I really liked these. So they had this video recording of kids around a pond. And I thought that was so nice because it wasn't a contrived setup. It was just kids around a pond having a discussion, which is very cute, yes. And as you can see from here, they've got what the child has said, where the childs are pointing. So CH is child 1, CH2 is child 2. And I really like this. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I really liked how they used the Maori word as well for what a early educator is. Yeah. I just really like that inclusion of their culture. And it was quite nice to see like how the kind of interaction is going, and I'll get through into a little bit more, but you can see there's kind of all these symbols that tell us what is happening. So the colons is elongation. Hey, yes, I'm just sorry, I just at a moment.
Big
Duck, yeah.
Big duck.
Yeah, and then look, that's big duck. And the dots also, if there's the pauses between it, and then the teacher does say something, could be an eel, and then she's getting the child's getting her attention again, and then she does ask, do you know what that duck's called? And it goes on for the child to say, huh? And she says it's called a swan, and then goes into this whole discussion of the swan, and then the eels and where the eels like to live. And what was really nice about all of this is, so what they showed really nicely was how child 1 makes noticing both verbally and gesturally, so that he really does maximize his communication with his friends and with the teacher, and that emphasis on the size of the duck, and trying to establish what is also the accurate object, because they were going between looking at the duck versus the eel versus trying to get them to the swan. And so it was quite nice because, then that also was about a bug, and it was quite nice to see how they engaged in that interaction. Sorry, I'm not going to go through all of this because what I really liked is what also came out of it. So they had all these interactions and then they played this video recording back with the teachers. And I thought that was also where the really meaty things did come out. And what was really nice is what they spoke about is how when the early childhood educator references the term swan, she centers the discussion about the importance of using correct terminology for wildlife in but not in a really directive way. It was kind of the flow of the conversation. And what they said, that sometimes when more formal content knowledge is discussed, with also this kind of like informal content happening, both are really, really important for children's learning. And I really like that when they looked at this video with the early childhood educators, the one actually said after watching this that if things are dumbed down, it just teaches children that they don't understand things. But if you teach them complex concepts from the start, then they can build their knowledge around that. And I thought that was quite interesting for just having like read the transcriptions, watched the video, having a discussion, for an educator then to come up and to identify that for herself or himself in that context, I thought that was also quite powerful because it's not a researcher saying, you know, you must teach him the correct word of using swan, not just it's a big duck, like that was a good thing that you did, so you need to make sure you do it more in future. Kind of, it was so self-generated, but with also more meaning of understanding actually by me doing this, I'm acknowledging in children that they are so, they're able to understand these complex concepts. I really did like that. And it really liked, they also continued to discuss that the transcripts really demonstrated how language would could position children as either competent or less than, and how she was engaging with them, it was showing that they're competent, not less than. And I really liked that because I also thought, like, when we're looking at engagements, how is it positioning the people within those engagements as well, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, and it's that concept that we use actually in aphasia therapy, of revealing competence and acknowledging competence.
Yep.
So it's the style of teaching and how that reveals competence, but it's also how concepts are introduced and taught. Yeah, it's very, very powerful, I think, for an educator to have these aha moments in their own teaching.
Yep.
Yeah.
And for it not to be superimposed, because I feel like so often stuff is just superimposed.
Yeah. But also to see how it works in practice. So what is an effective strategy? What works? What doesn't work? And you can see it there in the interaction. So the children respond in a certain way that shows that way of introducing complex vocab is actually a positive way of doing things, because the children respond to it very well. Yeah, definitely.
So I'm sorry, these slides have a lot on them, but
I know we could talk for days.
But I really like this as well, and this was the next step of like why CA was also creative, and this is something that like Jenny has spoken a lot with me about, with delving back into CA, about that CA for applied means to inform practice is what's powerful, not just CA for the sake of doing CA, because I'm like sometimes, I just want to do it and see what's happening in the interactions, but actually the application of what you find out is what's also the key and the power, and what made CA creative for them.
But just to say, I think on that point, doing CA just to look at and understand the mechanics of a basic interaction is so key as well, because you can't get to the applied work if you don't have that understanding. So, for example, we've been looking at these simulated interactions, and there are instances where students are using the word okay a lot. And Catherine Tam from our Interact group has been leading us back to foundational papers that have been published on what does okay do in an interaction. So it's not necessarily an applied focus, but just having that understanding, then we can say, well, what does this look like in our applied context? What does an okay do in a conversation to either to halt communication or to shut down the patient? And how did we then take that forward in terms of teaching students to avoid doing that or stop doing that? Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, so you need the basics, and then you can use the basics to move into the applied space.
Definitely. Okay, so this was just kind of the steps that they went through, and I thought it was nice just to have the steps. But again, you see, even with the unmotivated, look what step 1 is. They agree on a phenomenon of joint interest.
Yeah.
So they must have all agreed that talking around the pond was something of interest.
Yeah.
But is it that broad interest?
It's the broader interest.
Not saying that, okay, how did you introduce the word swan to the children?
Yes, or how should we teach complex
vocab? Yep.
Yeah, I think it's that broader interest in how are children learning, and looking at pedagogy, and then diving in deeper as you get down through the steps. Yeah.
Definitely. And I just like this as well, just a reminder, they spoke quite a bit about ethical consent, and just being aware of ethical consent when you're video recording or an audio recording, especially for people that are maybe in the room that didn't consent to it. So I just thought that was good to also just keep in mind, as always. And then, everyday routines are recorded. And then, they said that teachers or participants identify your significant moments, The researcher transcribes and analyzes the significant moments.
Sounds so easy.
Yeah, that's one step, just one step.
Hours and days and weeks. Yeah.
Definitely. And again, I liked our discussion about the significant moments. And I do think that's something to keep in mind. Participant significant moments versus researcher significant moments. Versus also, I mean, like with those simulations, like I was a facilitator in those simulations.
Yes.
And I didn't even pick up on like the introductions or how they were doing orientation. Like that wasn't even a blip on my radar till I went and re-looked at the data. And then was like, this is like something feels weird. Like this is off. That's what I felt the whole time watching the videos, was something's off with how they're engaging with these patients, which I didn't necessarily feel in the simulations.
No. I mean, it would be interesting actually for him, Nancy, and I to sit at some point. Maybe we should do that and chat about what would we have said was useful or interesting to look at before this. I mean, now we're very biased because we've looked at it in detail, but have that kind of a discussion on what we might have picked up on.
And I think we did write some reflections or something afterwards. So it would be interesting to go back to those.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the thing that stood out was just how nervous the students were with this process. They'd never done it before. So the anxiety, I think, for me was something that really stood out. But, you know, that's not what we focused on in the data.
Not at all. Not at all.
What came out as important and salient.
Definitely. And then also, as I've said before, then number 6 was that meeting held where the significant moments were played, and then the teacher practitioners or participants were invited to talk about why they thought the moments were significant. And then the researcher would share their transcription and preliminary analysis to extend the discussion. So I thought that was quite a nice way also, just for an idea of how, if you're wanting to run a group like that, to kind of bridge of saying, okay, you explain first to me why you thought it was important, what stood out for you. Okay, now this is the analysis we're doing. This is kind of the things that have stood out for me. And then it makes the discussion deeper, because that's what I've also found. Sorry, we keep going on about these simulations in speech therapy. It's a really good working current example. But the thing is, like, the first time I was looking at it, I mean, I was like, I don't know. I literally didn't know till I had that meeting with Jenny. And then she was like, oh, but look, nobody said they're a speech therapist. I was like, oh. Oh yeah, like I didn't think about that, you know, or nobody told the poor patient their name, and like little things like that start popping out, and you're like, oh. And then from those discussions to taking things to like the Interact data analysis, to another meeting as well with Catherine, like the different not even viewpoints, but the different layers of depth. Yep. Yeah. Has been very interesting. So I can just see how this would be so valuable as well for the researcher, and going deeper into the analysis.
But really being open to studying your own practice.
Yes.
Reflecting on what you're seeing, engaging with participants.
Yes.
So again, it's moving away from that concept that you were talking about earlier of extracting the knowledge. I'm just here to take your story, take your knowledge. This is a very, very different kind of process.
Yep.
Yeah, very deep and meaningful. Though.
Yep, definitely. And creative. Creative. You see there.
Creativity. You know, everybody's probably picked up on the huge enthusiasm we have for this work. And I think that's where the creativity comes as well, is to kind of break barriers and to say, let's do something that people have never really done before. So nobody's really looked at how students learn in speech path sims using these methods. No one's done it. We've just done a big review on methods that people use for simulation, and CA did not pop up once. So that's exciting, I think, is the creativity comes in the novelty and the excitement of running a project in this way.
Definitely. And I think we really have discussed all of these at length. But I also did like where the feedback was that the participants really did value the stop and reflect on their own practice, because it was also something that they rarely get to do in everyday life.
Absolutely. Well, we
yeah.
found that valuable for us
Yes.
as educators. You know, we've never stopped and thought, how do you effectively do an orientation assessment with a patient? It's just taken for granted. This is how we do things.
Yep. These are the questions you ask. I've told the students what are the questions they ask, so they ask those questions,
but we've never looked at how
that
to use them and what's effective, and could we tweak them to be more effective and clearer for the patient who's already got a brain injury and struggling to understand
them. Definitely.
convoluted ways of asking.
Yeah. So that's been really interesting for us, and that's where I think it would be really interesting allowing participants that as well. So so in conclusion, yay. And it's yay, because I was also like, how do I plan this so that I finish in an hour with the chatting? But I said it. So again, so in conclusion, it really does offer an opportunity for the real life voices of your participants to be heard, to inform. And I said they're the adults, the researchers, other participants, because I didn't just want it to limit it to what was in this article, about what really matters to them as well. And then it allows that authentic professional development, which they used the word authentic a lot, Jenny, a lot. While I was reading it, I was like, you're very authentic. But it also, like in the conclusion, said they value that authentic reflection that you then shape around your co-constructors involved in an interaction. So it really does marry nicely reflexivity, co-construction, and valuing and changing the power dynamics.
Yeah, I like that term, co-constructors, as opposed to just co-construction. So again, sort of acknowledging the voices and the roles that people play in co-constructing.
Definitely.
Very powerful. As we're talking, I'm thinking of all these ways that we could extend this subject. How can we involve students and really do this kind of approach with the students and just see how that works? Does it work?
Does it work, or are they too embarrassed by what they're viewing? It's so interesting.
It's creating that safe space. People feel that they're not sort of being attacked by, now I'm on a screen and everybody's looking at me. I see Roshni's got her hand up. Roshni?
I know there might be criticism with the word authentic, but I joined a bit late, but there is the pedagogical theory called authentic e-learning by Harrington, Oliver, and Reeves. And if one looks at foregrounding both theories of the methodology of conversational analysis as well as authentic e-learning, that might assist in terms of not just engaging, but especially if you're looking at how courses are designed and how, if you're going to observe in that way or record in that way, that there could be alignment. Thanks.
That's brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roshni. And this is exactly why we have to do interdisciplinary research, to bring in people who know the pedagogical theories and who have different perspectives and angles on this. So thank you. I've scribbled that down and we'll go and look that up. Definitely very useful. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks.
So we've got a lot of new projects going on using CA methods. So the SIM one is one of them. I've also got a whole lot of, we've got videos of interprofessional SIMs that we ran earlier this year with health science students. So that's also there to analyze. And I found a whole lot of CA articles on analyzing debriefs with students after SIMs using CA. So there's a ton of opportunity here. The WITS Interact group, which Catherine Tam and Daniela Raffaelli have established, is running strong. So doing a lot of this kind of CA work in all kinds of fields. So if anyone is interested in doing more work, extending work, you know where to find us and what to do. So thank you, everyone. This was such a great discussion once again. And just so exciting to be able to engage with these kinds of methodological issues that align with projects that we're grappling with. And this is really where the joy comes in doing research and being a researcher and having the academic freedom to just explore and get excited about what we're doing, and kind of breathes new life into the teaching and learning, which I think sometimes can feel a bit stale after a while. So yeah, this is what makes it interesting. So thank you, Nancy, for such a great presentation. And yeah, we look forward to a lot more with this project. Yeah, and very happy to chat further about this and
Thank you.
brainstorm new ideas for what we do with SIM this year, coming up in block 4 with the speech pad students. Yeah.
Thank you.
So thanks everyone for joining online. Yes.
Sorry, can I just interrupt for a second?
Go for it.
For the people online, just remember, if you want your CPD points, to put your name and your number, HPCSA number,
Thanks for
in the chat, please.
Thanks if you can do that. Yeah. And we'll see you next time. So have a great day further. And thanks for joining us, everyone. Much appreciated. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.